greatest guitar players in the world.
Because
he will show you.
I only thrive on negative reinforcement.
And he's one of the funniest human beings. When you come up on Instagram, I'm like, I like it, whether you're playing or whether you're just doing an advertisement for one of your gigs.
Yes, well.
When you're on tour. And I always think to myself, it's like he only does one take of these things, right?
That's true, unless I say something that I think might get myself in trouble, and then I post it right away.
Your outtake videos from Weldon Guitars on YouTube, I think everybody knows those videos. And if you don't, you should watch it. Watch Greg's outtake videos.
Well, yes, we try to have a little fun. We were joking before we went on. Sometimes people will get online. I mean, the vast majority of people are very kind, but every now and again people are like, "Pish, that gets tiring after a few minutes." Like, that's just the way I am. So if you're saying you don't like me, that's cool, but don't think I'm affecting some kind of thing.
Okay, so Greg, when you have to do demos of things, that's only a little bit of what you do. You're an artist, you tour around the world.
Right.
But when you do demos for guitars,
yeah,
you have to have a really huge vocabulary of things to play. And it's all improvising.
Correct.
How do you even know what to play when you sit down? Is it the first thing that you hear, whatever the guitar sounds like? What if the guitar plays terribly?
Well, that happens. Well, I usually have an arsenal of stuff that I usually will do. Like, usually if I'll start off in like a neck pickup of a guitar, and the kind of shtick that we do, the routine that we do is that we usually start off clean and then add a little heat, as the case may go, for each pickup selection.
Yeah.
So a lot of times we'll just end up doing a blues, some songs, but it's just all in the moans, just whatever comes to mind.
You play blues like that, but yet you're incorporating the changes, like some of it is what you play in jazz blues.
Right.
You have the turnarounds, you go from the 4-chord back to the 1-chord and stuff, you play passing diminished chords and things like that.
Right.
You're combining vocabularies, and it's interesting because you'll use not too much jazz stuff to where it sounds like you're a jazz guitar player.
Right.
Talk about how you do that and why you do that.
I like the knowing about the harmony of jazz, and I'm into certain vocabulary of single note jazz, but I find that, with all respect to jazz players, in order to be a true jazz guitar player, you have to immerse yourself in that vocabulary and know it left, right, and center. And that was never really my aim. My aim was just to be a wise-ass blues guitar player that knew his way around some other stuff.
Okay, so who are some of the jazz players that you incorporated stuff from?
Well, I think early on, when I was I did go to school for music. I really majored in beer, if we're honest, but I got past that. But I went to a school in the middle of Wisconsin, University of Wisconsin, Stevens Point. And the guitar instructor up there was also the head of the jazz department, which was very unusual at the time. And he was very open-minded. His name was Mike Irish. He's a fantastic. She was cool with the fact that, I wanted to know how to play over changes. I wanted to know how to read and write, music at somewhat of a professional level, and to be able to, function in a situation if I heard some funky chord changes to know what was going on. I did not envision myself. I had no interest in learning standards at the time. There was a long period of time where I refused to play a major seventh chord. It just was not in my arsenal of desires. So over the course of time, like when I first got up there, I had been into George Benson, particularly the bluesier stuff. I didn't know what the hell he was doing.
Who does?
Exactly. I mean, it's just like when he goes off on one of those tirades, I don't know what the hell's happening. I mean, you know, my only George Benson, like I know that kind of thing. So I'm doing a. You can also take that idea and go up to minor third. So I'll listen to stuff like that from guys like George Benson and go, well, I can add that to my stew, but yet, you know, I'm not going to be able to go off on a tirade of which I'm going to do a little that kind of stuff. Like, ask me to do his fast, you know, portal activities or any of his other stuff, and I'll be kind of like, what? But there are certain things that I'll be able to put that into the old gristle stew and mix it up. But when I first got up to school, I guess the guy that was the gateway drug, if you will, was Charlie Christian, because that I could, you know, relate to.
Yeah.
And I would take little things like. So little things like that make sense to me to be able to play more over the chord changes of a blues instead of just kind of sticking to pentatonic line.
Not to interrupt, for those people that don't know who Charlie Christian was.
Right. Charlie Christian played with the Benny Goodman Orchestra back in the late 30s, early 40s. And unfortunately passed away very young, and was the first kind of electric guitar hero.
And was a huge influence on people like Wes Montgomery, and really, honestly, all the jazz guitarists that came after him, and blues guitarists.
Right, and was an embryonic bebopper.
Yes, that's right.
It was something I could grab a hold of that made sense to my blues brain. And then I really got into, thanks to my buddy Mike Irish, prior to that, right before I went to school, I went to this little jazz camp when I was like a junior in high school. And I was playing telly at the time, and I had my kind of my blues game together, if you will. And you know, I knew everything off live at the Fillmore with the Allman Brothers, and I just gotten into like, you know, Albert Lee and that kind of stuff. So I had, you know, my style was already kind of blueprinted. And he was very cool, because a lot of the jazz guys, especially back then, and again, this is just my own experience, folks, this is not a blanket condemnation.
Everything he says is true.
But it used to be, the people I would encounter, unless you played an ES-175 with flat wound strings through a polytone amp, you were a heretic. Right. And they would call you a rock and roller. And rock and roller meant everything from ABBA to King Crimson. It was like everything was lumped in to this giant heap of wrongdoing that they referred to as rock. You're one of those rock and rollers. But Mike was very cool. He was like, hey, I really like what you're doing. If you wanted to add a little bit more jazz sensibility to what you're doing, there are these guys, Robin Ford and David Collins. First time I ever heard those names uttered.
Yeah.
So I remember I went out, and I think my first Larry Carlton record I got was Friends, because that had just come out. And I heard it and what was so weird about it is I went into my local record store right after I went to that camp, and they were playing something. And I walked in and I was like, what's B.B. King playing? Who's that playing with him? He's doing more jazz stuff. I don't know if it's that Larry Carlton back in shoes. Yeah, there's some great tunes on there. Yeah. So that was my first foray into the world of the Carltone. And then I think my first Robin Ford thing I heard was on Tom Scott and LA Express. And so I started to get hip to trying to figure out what those guys were doing. And then I really got into Schofield.
Yes.
And my two favorite Schofield records were Loud Jazz and Blue Matter. And because he did, again, some stuff that I could relate to. There's that thing where it's like, you know, that's something my blues brain could comprehend. But he would do some outside stuff too that I like. When he would do that over like an A blues, like, and I was like, I'm taking that and adding that to my blues soup. And throwing that in the blues jam and just inspiring hate from all the blues.
Schofield did a lot of this languid or something that's liquidy sounding lines.
Yeah.
He was kind of the opposite, because he would add blues to his jazz playing.
Right, but he had always had that skanky, filthy, bluesy approach to this thing that I really dug. Yeah. And then I remember hearing there was for a brief period of time when I was up at school, there was another guitar player who went on to do great things named Pete McCann, who's out in New York, plays for a bunch of people, he's an astounding jazz guitar player. But he was more of like a traditional jazz guy, and was really kind of a kind of thing he accoladed at that particular point in time. It was fantastic. So I was interested in picking his brain, because I didn't know that world. And he's the one who introduced me to Mike Stern, and I got Rewind Miles, of course. And then right around at that time, I went to college from 85 to 88. And I got that upside down. And then I started to try to figure out what was going on there. But I was never like thoroughly involved in trying to figure out every note of it. It was all to the thing of how can I add this stuff to my soup and just kind of take this blues rock world down the road a little bit to be more of my own. And that's kind of what I do.
I'd like to take a second to talk to you about this channel. Of the people that regularly watch my channel, 58% are actually not subscribed. So I encourage you to hit the subscribe button now. This will help me to get even more of my dream guests and continue to grow my channel. Thank you. So Greg, what about guitarists like Joe Pass? Did you ever appreciate his playing?
I did. And I do some Joe Passes.
You do some Joe Passes?
Yeah,
so you do some.
If I do like the chordal things,
yeah.
You know, like one I love, like go to a 4-chord. That's a Joe Pass. Or like if I go to, that's a Joe Passism. Or there's like a. Those are all things I got.
There's one turnaround thing in your blues where you did the two moving lines going like that. That's a very Joe Pass.
I don't even know where I got that. All I know is that I stole this part from somebody.
That's literally out of the Joe Pass.
That's right.
Yeah, that's a.
But then I added this little snippet. I added the.
Perfect.
And the wiseacre finish for the kids.
Okay, so talk about your rock influences.
Yes.
So who are the people that were, who are your main rock influences?
Well, Henderson's my all-time favorite.
Yeah.
And Creamer, Clapton. Those are my two main things that even to this day I go back and play along with all the time. I did a report on Jimi Hendrix when I was in 3rd grade. Because I roomed with my brother. We were talking about this. We both come from families of 7 kids. The Church of Rome. And I was the youngest of 7. My brother was the oldest. There were 5 girls in between. So I had a room with my brother, and I was exposed to his record collection. And you really look up to your older brother. He's like a god to you. And when you walk into the room and you're with your friends playing around the house, and you walk into the room and he's sitting, his legs crossed in front of the stereo, and you're listening to this music, and you just sit like, what's that? This is Cream, Chuck Bruce, Ginger Baker, Ed Clapton, commonly known as the Cream, 3 of the greatest of their instruments in the history of man. It's like, whoa. So from there on, I was like, Clapton was, especially that Cream era, up to like 1970, don't get me wrong, folks, we're still a fan of that stuff afterwards. But I would just say the intention, I kind of put it as this way. For me, it's in the history of man. You're just like, whoa. So from there on, I was like, Clapton was, especially that Cream era, up to like 1970, don't get me wrong, folks, we're still a fan of that stuff afterwards. But I would just say the intention, I kind of put it as this way. For me, it's like, prior to 1970, his voice was his fingers on the guitar. After 1970, his voice was his voice, and he still played great guitar, but the intention was different.
Yeah. So Greg, a lot of your playing that I'll see is you play like chicken picking stuff, like the Chet Atkins style guitar playing. Where did that happen? Well, actually demonstrate something.
Sure. So the kind of I remember I wrote this tune. A tune called Spank It back in the day. I thought this was funny as hell because it's a sharp 9-chord. But if Jimi Hendrix scored the country song, awesome. But I with Dire Straits, when I'd hear him do any kind of rhythm type of thing, like Malcolm, that is, it'd be like So that was stuff I just kind of, Knopfler, and then I heard Albert Lee playing with Clapton. And so then I was hearing him doing all that kind of stuff. And then I heard Ray Flack playing around 1983. There was a record called Skags, Heartaches and Highways and Heartaches. And I heard him playing. And so I thought that's cool. So I had that to my arsenal as well. But again, I never really liked straight ahead country music at any point in time. I just like that sound. So then I heard, I learned flag lick that I use all the time. That kind of stuff. But I like to mix it up with all the others. And then I got into Roy Buchanan, but I didn't get into him until later, relatively speaking, because that wasn't in my older siblings' record collection. So the first time I heard Roy Buchanan, which I've probably taken most of my telly pyrotechnic stuff from him and Danny Gatton. But Roy, I kind of was a little bit more into because he was more bluesy. Yeah. Danny was more jazzy, which I still obviously Danny was impeccable. But I first heard Roy when he put out a record on Alligator Records, again when I was in high school, so it's like, 84-ish maybe, somewhere in there. He put out a record called The Guitar Plays the Blues, and I heard those sounds, and I thought, this kind of sounds like Hendrix on a telly with no whammy bar, no Marshall. This is awesome. And then when I went up to college, and there was a Sneaky Pete's Blues campaign radio, and I would listen to it whenever it was on. I remember I had just taken a shower and come back to my room, and I'm hearing this blues, and I'm hearing these sounds, and when I talk about, when I would do that kind of stuff, like, that sounds like Band of Gypsies, I just stood in my tracks like, this has got to be Roy Buchanan. So then I did the deep dive on Roy, learned an absolute bunch, but what I would do initially is that I would always do my chicken picking separately from my flat picking. So the Knopfler way of playing, I learned with my thumb and first finger. And it was just the idea of, if I put my first finger on the A string, put my thumb down on the same string, the thumb hits a note that's muted because your first finger's behind it, you should just get a big old thud, and then I would pop up in the string. And just kind of use that all over the place and kind of get wiser for you. Right? Or whatever. So I started to just kind of apply that kind of stuff to my playing, but there was kind of this delineation between blues playing with my pick and that split second to pop the pick in between my two fingers and then do the chicken picking. And in my darkest brain, I was thinking, that split second that it takes me to whip that pick over there and back and forth, I probably could have thrown in 147 minutes. So I thought, I've got to figure out how to do this chicken picking with the pick. And I knew guys were doing it, so I knew how to do that. Exactly. I knew that James Burton did by the time I was looking for him. It seems so weird to get into James Burton after being into Albert Lee and Roy Buchanan. It's like, there's the guy that invented it all, And then I got into Chet those guys. But anyway, so I knew that they were playing with the pick and finger, so I forced myself to do it. It was not easy. So the basic same concept. I don't need much of a nail. I just need a little white showing above the cuticle, and I got enough to pop the string. But it's the idea if I put my, on the instrument, I put my middle finger down with a little bit of a nail, the pick in front of it, and the pick plucks a note that's muted because your nail is behind it. It's a little more metallic sounding. Then I use that little bit of a nail to pop it up. So I kind of go between the both now, depending on what I'm doing. Like if I'm doing a bluesy thing, I'll always use my finger. I'll do my Albert Collins type of thing, I'll use the finger. Then when I do more of the pyrotechnic chicken picking thing, I'll use my picking finger.
When you're doing the Chet Atkins thing before,
yes.
What are you using for that? Are you using just fingers?
Well, for that, I'm using the pick and the fingers together. Okay. So. So I had to learn how to do that. That took me a while. And there's kind of a gateway drug for that world is kind of just doing the mystery train thing.
Yes.
The whole thing is you got to keep that pick going like this. I think what messed me up initially when I tried to figure this stuff out is I felt, Travis pick. Technically it's like going, like A string, D string, E string, D string, A. And I realized all it really has to do is to kind of sound like you're doing a stride piano, because that was originally the goal of, I think, Travis is to do that. So, but a lot of times when I show this to people, they'll skip out on hitting the E string every time. So or the E string, D string's always going like this. Do it slow, like.
Okay, were you into Lenny Breau?
I knew who Lenny Breau was once I got to college. But it just seemed otherworldly. So the only kind of Chetish or like I could do that kind of like Cannonball Rag thing. A buddy of mine at college was older. His family was a musical family. They had like a big family reunion every year, and they'd all play different music. He played saw as well as guitar and banjo. You know. So to me, it's like anyone who could play that style had an uncle that played or a family member. It's like, oh, Bob showed me how to play that Merle Travis stuff with the Chet Atkins. Like I had one uncle, his name was John. Worked in back in to me, it just was. It was beyond my realm of comprehension. And I remember specifically being out doing a Fender thing back in the day, probably 20-some years ago at this point, good guy. And my trio was playing at the Guitar Center in Hollywood, doing some kind of a guitar festival-y type of thing inside. And we played, and then when we were on break, I went into the vintage room, and Doyle Banks was playing. And he started off, he was playing like a blues where it's like, you but it was inspired by what I saw him do. And I thought to myself, he's playing lead and rhythm all at the same time. There's one guy doing it. And I didn't think about the financial implications. That sounds pretty lucrative. But I thought, I'm a guitar player that used to play with other people. And that's all well and good. And I strive to play well with others. But wouldn't it be awesome to be able to just sit down by myself and play music?
Right.
And so I made a choice to learn some of those tunes. And it's kind of a combination of all kinds of different things. But I actually got a book of transcriptions. I was doing a ton of Howland stuff at the time, and they had this book, Chet Atkins Fingerstyle. And it had, I don't know, maybe 12, 14 titles in there. And I got it, and I was a little skeptical because, is it really the real stuff that he played? And I started going, and it took me like, okay, here's 1 bar, here's 2 bar, and then I would work on making them go in some tempo where I could do it consistently, and then 3 bars, and then 4 bars, okay, review. It took me a long time, but once I decoded it, thanks to that book, then I could hear the stuff I needed to pick it off the record. So I just started adding those to my arsenal, and then I started writing a bunch of tunes using that thing. But it just is fun because I can sit around the house and just play, and you accompany yourself, and it's like, I don't have to deal with humans at all. This is fantastic.
Okay, so what about your slide playing? Because you're a great slide player. How did you learn how to play slide?
Early on, the thing that struck me the most, I would say, was Mick Taylor's playing in the Stones. Mm-hmm. And a record I used to love to play along with was Get Your Yayas Out, the live Madison Square Garden thing. It's a treasure trove of glorious delights. And still to this day, it's one of my favorite things to do is just play along with records. But back in the day, I put the record thing, and I had my little PD Rage screaming, and I would play along. But the thing that got me the most about his playing is that his vibrato is so great. So nowadays, when I play slide, I play a lot of standard tunes, but now I'm kind of going back to playing. I've got a guitar set up playing open G, and then I've got another one for open E. Just because what's kind of weird about it is I just don't know those tunes as well, so I have a tendency to just do little primal things, whereas I'm a little too wise-assy on the standard tune because I know, this and do that. But the biggest thing for me is like vibrato. So a few different things. So a few different things. When I first started playing, I did use it on my third finger because Dwayne Allman, because I got into Dwayne Allman.
Yeah.
So I got a book, slide guitar by Arnold Roth. I learned slide from him, but yeah, you and everybody else. That book was fantastic, and it kind of taught me this right hand thing, which I think is key to reading and just adding that. Whenever you got flush on steel, sounds good, but it's not. You've got the ability to have a little bit more dynamic control. So the basic gist with the right hand is that I've got my third finger on the high E string, my middle finger on the B string, first finger on the G string, and then my thumb draped over the bottom three strings. So that's like the initial template.
Yeah.
But when I start doing anything that needs a little bit more dexterity, I'll always revert to just the thumb and the first or second finger. But I always go back to the original position. Okay.
Thank you.